Hi, I'm Jude, and today we're going to make some okra and tomato sauce. So in today's recipe, we're going to need at least one saucepan and a lid. I'm going to use 2 saucepans and 2 lids, but if you only have one saucepan, that's fine. I'll show you how to do that in just a bit. I'm going to recommend you get one colander, but if you don't have a colander, you can wash everything by hand. That's no problem. It takes a little bit longer, but it's not too much. You're going to need one small knife, and today I have my knife sharpener. This is a pretty cheap knife sharpener that you can get at almost any grocery store, or you can probably get it at a lot of convenience stores as well. And I'm going to go ahead and sharpen the knife just to make sure it's up to par, and I can cut through the tomatoes. So today, for the ingredients, we're going to need about a pound of tomatoes. We're going to need 1 onion, and we're going to need some okra. Right here I have a little bit less than a pound of okra, and it costs about $1.91 at the DeKalb Farmers Market. I also have a whole bunch of basil. All of this basil only cost me $1.69. But when you're shopping for basil and fresh herbs, you've got to realize that even if it's cheap in the store, it's not cheap if you buy it for one dish and you don't use it ever again, because it does go bad. So if you buy basil, make sure you're going to use the basil. I use a lot of basil, so it's no issue for me. But if you don't use a lot of basil, I would recommend getting a dried basil. It doesn't taste quite as good, but it does do the trick, and it lasts a lot longer. I also have a whole bunch of spices. These are all the spices that I like, that I'm going to put in here. I have some pepper, I have some paprika, I have some cayenne pepper, and I have some thyme. If you like spicy food, but you don't have cayenne pepper or paprika, you can always use the little chili flakes that you get in the pizza packets, and that works just as well. All right, and over here today I have a little coffee mug filled up with some water and a spoon. This is going to be my tasting spoon for the tomato sauce, and I'm going to keep it in the water just to keep it clean enough so I can taste any differences in the food. So when we're cutting tomatoes, tomatoes can be a little bit difficult to deal with if you don't have a sharp knife. And the reason is because the skin on the outside will catch, the knife won't be able to go through, and you'll end up squishing your tomato instead of cutting it. So today I'm going to sharpen my knife with a pretty cheap knife sharpener. It's just a plastic knife sharpener. And all I have to do for this one is run it up and down a couple times. Alright, now that I think, yep, I've got my knife pretty sharp, I'll be able to cut into these tomatoes much better than if I didn't have my knife sharpened. Now this little part right here, we don't really want to eat that. It's kind of fibrous, it's not the best thing to chew on, so we're just going to cut that part of the tomato off. Okay, then we're going to cut the tomatoes in half and dice them up a little bit. You can do a rough chop, I wouldn't worry too much. We're going to be cooking this down and reducing it a little bit, so it's not going to maintain its shape. And all I'm doing here is I'm cutting lengthwise like this, and then going across it to form little cubes. And this stuff will cook pretty evenly. Alright, now that I've got all my tomatoes cut up, I'm going to go ahead and get started on the onion. Now with the onion, first thing you're going to want to do is just peel off all of the papery outer layers, okay? And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to get in there and peel off every little bit of the onion. If that is the case, you can go ahead and take your knife and go ever so slightly. Don't go too deep. And you can cut a little bit into the onion, like this. And this will help you get in there and peel it off a little bit easier. Now what we're going to do is we're going to dice the onion. So I've seen so many people trying to cut onions and they don't do very well because they don't know how to cut an onion. My roommate's one of those people. He's figured out his own way, but I'm going to show you the way that most people cut onions. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our knife and we're just going to cut off the very top part. Okay, we don't want any of this stuff in there. And then we're going to cut it in half. Using my small knife, this is kind of difficult. Then we're going to take 1/2, like this, and we're going to take the knife and go about halfway and cut into the onion. Okay, and we're going to cut it on both sides. Not going too deep. Then we're going to take our onion and lengthwise we're going to cut into the onion so that you end up with a whole bunch of strands coming in one direction. Now that we have a whole bunch of strands, all we have to do is cut lengthwise, and we get a whole bunch of little tiny cubes. Now when we get to the very end, or the butt of the onion, we're going to go ahead and just go lengthwise, like we did on the very top, and then we're going to go crosswise to those, and we're going to get a whole bunch of cubes again. And you never want to waste anything that you can save. So we'll go ahead and cut this up into cubes. And that's half the onion done. Okay, and all we're going to do is just dump it right in there. So we're going to set this over here on about a medium to medium low heat. And we're going to add a little bit of salt to help those onions and tomatoes break down. And we're going to cover it and let it sit. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my colander and my okra. I'm just going to rinse off the okra. I'm going to use cold water so that I don't get all of that sliminess going on in the okra. I know some people like the sliminess of okra, but other people don't quite like it. So I'm just going to wash it with cold water so they don't get too slimy. Alright, now that I've rinsed off my okra, I'm going to go ahead and take it out of the colander and put it on here. And the okra is pretty dry, but it's not completely dry. So I'm going to take it out and I'm going to cut off the little stems at the tips of each bit of okra, and I'm not going to save that for my stock. That stuff, it doesn't taste quite as good. Now I'm going to cut about half an inch thick slices of okra, and I'm going to set those to the side, discarding the stem and then cutting the okra. Alright, I've got all of my okra cut up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and place it in this second saucepan, and I'm going to add a little bit of water and a little bit of vinegar to it. And then I'm going to add my spices, and I'm going to try to cook all of that water and all of that vinegar off so that the okra isn't too wet and slimy by the time I get around to adding it to the tomato sauce. I'm going to turn the heat on to a medium-high heat. I'm going to add a little bit of water and a dash of vinegar. Alright, and I'm going to let this come up to temperature. I'm going to cover this so that not too much of the liquid evaporates, and I'm going to go ahead and stir this. Now, one thing that you'll notice when you're cooking your tomatoes and onions is that a lot of liquid starts to form at the bottom, and that's just the liquid coming out of the onions and the tomatoes. And you want that for the tomato sauce. Now while that stuff is cooking over there, I'm going to go ahead and pick a couple leaves from my basil and pluck them into my colander and rinse them off. Now you don't need to rinse them off in the colander. You can just take them and rinse them off by hand. That's no problem. Alright, I've got all my basil washed off, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take it out of the colander and I'm going to lie it flat on top of itself, and we're going to do something called a chiffonade with some of them if you're looking to be fancy. I won't use all of the basil because I understand not everybody wants to be fancy. But what we'll do is we'll stack them all on top of each other and then just roll them up. All right, like kind of like a burrito. And then we take our knife and we cut a whole bunch of small distances, and this creates a whole bunch of strips. And we can discard the stems if we want, or we can save them for our stock, or you can even put them into your dish. It's no issue. Now we have a whole bunch of thick strips, and this chiffonade isn't very fine. That's okay. But if you're not looking to be fancy, that's not a problem. You can just take some of the basil like this, lay it down flat. You don't have to spend too much time doing this. Just get it all in the same area so you don't cut it too many times. Right? And then you can just cut it basically the same way. The cut's going to be rougher, but that's okay because it still tastes just as good. Alright, there we go. Alright, looks like our okra is cooking up pretty well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and taste one of the pieces of okra to see how cooked it is. And it tastes pretty cooked. So I'm going to leave the lid off and I'm going to let all of that water evaporate. Then we're going to go ahead and cook it and crisp it up a little bit on the outside. Checking on our sauce over here, our tomatoes and onions, they're cooking down pretty well, and I'm going to go ahead and give that a taste too. They taste really good. I'm going to go ahead and add some spices, and I'll keep you guys updated. Now before the okra completely dries up, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of cayenne pepper to it to add a little bit of a kick. And I'm going to add a little bit of salt as well. Might even throw some pepper on there. Separating the spices like this gives a little bit of variety to the food you're making. So when you eat the food, it's not the same flavor in every single bite. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat off, and we're almost ready. So over here we have our sauce, and the sauce is pretty much ready. When I added the paprika soaked up a bit of the water, so it thickened up the sauce a little bit. That's completely fine. If you didn't add paprika or you didn't add too many spices, any dehydrated spices or anything like that, then your sauce might be a little bit more liquidy than mine. That's completely okay. It's going to taste a little bit different, and the texture will be a little bit different, but that's fine. Now if you don't have two saucepans like I did, instead of cooking the okra in a separate saucepan, you can throw it right in with your sauce. The only thing that I don't like about this is all of your okra, all of your onion, and all of your tomato, they sort of develop the same flavor. This way there's a little bit more variety in the flavor, and it's a little bit more exciting when you eat it. So I've just added all of the okra to the sauce, and it's almost ready to serve. So I've grabbed about half of the basil that I cut up. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that in there. The basil is going to add a bit of a freshness. Alright, we're just going to top it off with a little bit of basil, because you can never have too much. Alright. This is what it looks like when it's finished. And no, it's hot, but that's good.
I can smell the spice already. And I can feel it in my lungs.